Welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Lee Hunt, Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Leisure and Sport. So I hope you're all sitting comfortably and we will begin. So this is some housekeeping safety information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by the Queen Victoria statue. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk today should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting is being live streamed. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. So I just go around the tables and get everybody to introduce themselves. I've told you who I am. My function is to run the meeting and kind of set the agenda for today's meeting. So we'll go from the councillors here on the left. We'll start with Councillor Madgwick.
Thank you. Councillor George Madgwick for the Paulsgrove Ward, representative for Reform UK.
Good afternoon, Councillor Hannah Brentford, Drayton and Farlington.
Could I ask you guys just to bring the microphone a little closer because I'm on this hearing loop and it needs to pick it up. Yeah, do please.
Good afternoon, Councillor Hannah Brentford, Drayton and Farlington.
All right, keep going.
Good afternoon, Councillor Yinka Adeniro, Charles Dickens Ward.
I'm Claire Hardwick, the Head of Private Sector Housing.
Lee Hickman, Antisocial Behaviour Manager, Portsmouth Homes.
Lauren Rackham, Head of Community Safety, Portsmouth City Council.
I'm Colette Hill, Assistant Director of Neighbourhoods.
Good afternoon all. Richard Lee, Assistant Director of Culture, Leisure and Regulatory Services.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
All right, sat at the back as we have Toby for the Democracy Reporter from the News. We have Councillor Heaney, and we have, I know, Denise Perry, and two members of the public. Are you guys speaking today, or no? You're observing. All right. I think that's everybody in the room. I've got no apologies. In fact, we've got a full complement here this afternoon rather. And we've got the deputations for item 6, which is Ms Perry, Councillor Heaney, and Councillor Gerarda has asked that Councillor Heaney read out a written deputation, which I've agreed to. So I think you get 6 minutes for that, Councillor Heaney, and 6 minutes for yourself. So I'm not going to stick to rigid rules when it's something quite really important. Okay. So no apologies for absence. We've done any interests, members? So now we go to Mr. Lee, and he's going to give us our Trading Standards Service update. Members, you'll recall that there was a notice of motion in the council, which really reflected this report. But over to you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is indeed an information report only on the work of Portsmouth Trading Standards. What it attempts to do is to highlight or showcase some of the great work that we've done recently. There are 8 areas of the report. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read through it, but I will summarise each of the 8 areas and I will refer to certain sections within the report. As I say, it's a good news summary. Effectively, Portsmouth Trading Standards is stronger, better resource than it has been in recent years. Staffing has increased by 2 FTE recently with a new apprentice funded by the Department of Health and Social Care. And those additional resources certainly boost the long-term capacity of the service. We now have dedicated officers that focus on alcohol, tobacco, vape and harm reduction work, and at least one of these is fully funded externally. Really importantly, we benefit from an in-house lawyer, which is funded by Trading Standards, but sits within our legal services framework. The report highlights some of the high impact enforcement work of the service. We have multiple investigations underway which attempts to protect residents from fraud, counterfeit goods, unsafe products and rogue traders. We currently have 38 cases under investigation with 13 open and have proceeded through our matrix. I say matrix because I wish to bring your attention to section 5.1, and I'll read it out. Due to the relatively high levels of complaints and moderate or modest resources, the team have adopted an objective decision-making framework or matrix that enables consistency when justifying when we investigate certain complaints and those that we do not. The matrix firstly considers whether this is a priority area for trading standards or whether another agency might be better placed, such as the police. It then considers factors such as public safety, the vulnerability of the consumer, or victim impact. It also considers the financial detriment of the criminality, risk to property, environment, reputation of the sector, and the trader history before recommending proceeding and adopting the complaint for investigation. It's quite an important part because we receive thousands of inquiries each year to Portsmouth Trading Standards, and we have to select those which fall within that important matrix for escalation. It goes on to highlight some of the activities we've undertaken. You'll be aware in June 2025 there was a new legislation passed which related to single-use vapes, and that introduced a fixed penalty notice which was a part of our enforcement toolkit. And since then we've issued 7 fixed penalty notices for that purpose. We also have an alternative enforcement strategy when dealing with illicit tobacco, and that allows us to close premises which are non-compliant in terms of selling illicit products, tobacco products. We also work with national requirements in terms of product safety, and we recall products and support local businesses in that respect. We do proceeds of crime action, and proceeds of crime allows us to recover an element of illicit gains when there has been a criminal conviction, and dotted throughout the report the details of the amounts that we have been able to recover through the court process. We have a large number of successful cases in recent months, and they are set out within the Section 6, which is a sanitised version of those case studies. I won't run through them, but there are some very large-scale fraud investigations, again protecting vulnerable residents with financial detriment in the hundreds of thousands of pounds, and that's being prevented or addressed through those regimes. I'm also delighted to say that we are a authority that seeks assistance when that assistance is available. An example of this is our work with the TRIT team, which is the Tri-Regional Investigation Team. And in some of these investigations, whilst we have 7.8 staff, that is by no means sufficient for us to take on very complex cases, sometimes running for many years. And during the investigation of such cases, which could have tens of victims across the region, so not every victim is going to be a local resident, but when that occurs, we go to the TRIT team, and in one particular case, they have offered us up to £120,000 of staffing resource and specialist capabilities, such as in digital transformation. Sorry, transformation, that's a different subject. Digital investigation. I'm delighted to say that our work was recognised last year, and we were the winner of the Anti-Counterfeiting Team Award for tackling counterfeit goods. We also as set out within the report, and links are provided, we do receive a lot of positive press, both locally and nationally, for our relating to our enforcement successes. It's really important that we are better in our communication and visibility, and therefore last year we launched the new Portsmouth Trading Standards Facebook page. We usually post good news and not only good news, but alert the public to frauds and scams, and we do so a couple of times a week. This achieves our kind of visibility, having tens of thousands of views and significantly improving the public awareness of our work, scams, safety issues, and our enforcement activity. We've also completely carried out an overhaul of our website, making information clearer and more accessible to the public. I've put a little bit in the report in regards to our finances, and we do offer what is called primary authority support. So when a business wants to set up and they want to have assured advice from a local authority, they can choose Portsmouth, and we do so at a fee, for want of a better description, but that assured advice is very useful to businesses, particularly those starting up and wanting to comply with all the relevant legislation around that particular business. This is a national scheme which is supported by the last government and this government. And what it does effectively, where you have a business which may trade across the UK, receiving assured advice means that if you get an enforcement officer walking in to a premises perhaps in London or Manchester or Newcastle or wherever, once they have a partnership with the local authority, those officers will then engage with that local authority rather than that business having to deal with dozens of local authorities across the country, potentially. And it also enables us to support those really vital product safety and compliance systems that we are involved with. We also have assisted the National Crime Agency. We now have access to their intelligence systems, and this enables us to provide other local authorities with enhanced financial intelligence and access to some of those protected National Crime Agency data systems. The National Crime Agency were receiving around 550 requests for intelligence each year, and I'm very happy to say that we've been able to double access to their systems by taking this on behalf of the NCA. Of course, that is funded by the NCA currently, and we're hoping that we can develop that assistance to them and other local authorities in respect to financial intelligence over the next few years. The strong relationship we have with agencies is also really important to us, particularly on a regional basis. And we have an active role in Trading Standards South East Limited, where we work hand in hand with our regional partners. And we believe that this, and I think it's evidence throughout the report, that this improves our own efficiency. We can share our knowledge and expertise, and others can share theirs with us. And that also will help us prepare for the emerging potential restructure of the local government reorganisation. Finally, Chair, I would just like to highlight the comments of the Director in section 9.4, where we believe that Portsmouth Trading Standards delivers exceptional forward-thinking services that consistently protects residents, support businesses, and tackles criminal activity with a great deal of professionalism and impact. Portsmouth Trading Standards methods high-profile successes along side outstanding community engagement, we believe, showcase a truly modern, proactive trading standards service. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. I'll come to questions or comments in a minute. So we have to thank Mr. Lee and his highly skilled and dedicated team who go out there day in and day out and protect the communities across Portsmouth. There's absolutely no question that one of the leading teams in the United Kingdom, and we have decided, we agreed that we wanted to will the means and the resources, because this is one of the things that worry people mostly around Portsmouth. You know, rogue traders, it's not all about vape shops, and there's also this criminal activity around buildings and people doing so-called work at home. So we had Mr. Bradley Willis, who was in the Crown Court, and just because they've been prosecuted, that means say we give up and stop looking at them. We continue to look at them. So the investigations go on. As you heard, 38 cases ongoing right now, and it's an intelligence-led operation. So that means that when the public send in information, it's treated seriously, and we would encourage everybody out there, if they have any concerns about rogue traders, that they contact Mr. Lee and his team in Trading Standards. So once again, thank you very much indeed. Members, questions or comments? Councillor Brent.
Thank you. Oh, I think that's the first time you've called me Councillor Brent. Councillor Hunt, thank you. It's usually Hockaday. Thank you. I do appreciate the report from you, and I think it's just really, it's not a question, it's just a comment of thank you for what you're doing. I think it's really reassuring for residents of Portsmouth to know that there is so much work going into tackling all of these things, and it's great to hear about the cooperative working that you've got. And really, I think as a councillor, I can just echo the comments made in 9.4 by the director, because it's completely agreed. So thank you.
Yeah, same here really. I mean, I was on community safety as my first role on opposition when I became a councillor back in 2021, and the conversation about training standards was a lot different back then. The team was smaller, and I know that a lot of frustrations were that we as a council couldn't investigate the things that we wanted to, if I'm right, you know, and it was a real struggle. So it's great to see that there's more support for the service. It's great to see some really successful results, and it's really good that residents feel that they've got a place or point of contact that they can speak to and actually get some action. So it's good, and I like the communications element of it. I think, you know, that's really improved over the last few years as well, because I think people often didn't feel that there was much going on from a public perception. Often internally we know things that are happening, but from a public perspective it's often hard to realise. So I think the Facebook page and the announcements is a really proactive approach, which is massively supported, and yeah, it's a good report.
Yeah, just following on from that, you know, the Facebook page has made a big difference. I wish more councillors would share it, the articles. I do, frequently. The other thing I talk about is whack-a-mole, the game that we all remember. Until the law changes, I believe the government's bringing in some legislation, but until the law changes, this whack-a-mole, you know, you shut one down, another one pops up, will continue. The officers will do as much as they can to address that. But unfortunately, as I said in the full council meeting too, deregulation under successive governments has a dark side to it. There's very little control over now over shops, whereas before you used to have a reasonable amount of control over what shops opened and where. And unfortunately, that has all gone by the by in the headlong rush for market forces, and that's to be. That's not a good thing. Anyway, perhaps the government will bring back some more regulation, but I doubt it very much, because it looks like they're going to get rid of things like planning committees in any event. All right then, finishing on a good note, thank you very much indeed, Miss... Sorry, Yinka. Councillor Adeniran, beg your pardon.
No, that's all right. I'm not saying anything, just to say thank you to you. And then if it's okay, my chair, can we move item 6 forward because of Councillor Heaney? Is that okay with you? Agenda 6. Item 6, agenda number 6. Is it okay to move it forward?
does he want to hear about renters' rights?
I think,
Yeah, I understand that, but renters' rights are just as important, so we'll continue with the agenda, thank you. Yes, thank you. We'll continue with the agenda, thank you, Councillor Heaney. Thank you. Okay, so it's Claire, isn't it?
Thank you. So the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the key legislative changes that are being introduced through the Renters' Rights Act. The Act introduces significant changes to the private rental sector aimed at enhancing tenant protections and establishing new responsibilities for landlords. In turn, that places new duties on us as a local authority, and it will have a direct impact on regulatory activity of the private sector housing team and the housing needs advice and support services, which are responsible for both private sector housing regulation and homelessness duties within the local authority. The legislative changes necessitate a change to the current private sector housing enforcement policy, the approach to which is outlined within this report. So having been through the full parliamentary process, the bill received royal assent on the 27th of October last year. On the 13th of November last year, the government announced timescales for the implementation of the new Act, and that includes 3 phases, the first of which is effective from the 1st of May this year. And is outlined in section 5 of the report. So I'll just run through at a very high level what that looks like. So phase 1 from the 1st of May introduces a number of changes to tenancy reform. So that will introduce the end of fixed term tenancies will move to new periodic tenancy agreements. There'll be the abolition of Section 21 notices, so what's often referred to as no-fault evictions. There will be updates to Section 8 grounds of possession. Rent in advance will be limited to 1 month's rent. Rent increases will be limited to only once per year. And tenants will have the right to request a pet, and landlords will be unable to refuse that without a valid reason. At the same time, further changes are being implemented, so bidding wars will be banned, and it will become illegal to discriminate against tenants receiving benefits or with children. Rent repayment orders will be strengthened, and civil penalty notices will the new ones will be introduced, and the maximum fine that can be levied on some of the existing ones will be increased from £30,000 to £40,000. There's 2 further phases to the implementation of the Act. So the second part is coming later this year. We don't know the exact timescales for that yet, but that will be the introduction of a landlord ombudsman for the private sector, and an introduction to a landlord database. So it will be mandatory for landlords to be part of the register and to pay an annual fee to be part of that. And then the third phase is subject to consultation before further implementation, but that is intended to extend AWAB's law to the private rental sector, and to include the decent home standard in the private rental sector. And at the moment, that's expected to not be implemented until around 2035, so quite some time away from now. At the moment, the private sector housing team for Portsmouth City Council are generally focused on the safety and management of properties. And the new enforcement duties that are introduced through this Act will represent a significant widening of the focus of enforcement for the team. The new duties to regulate tenancy-related offences and discrimination, for example, are a significant change to the work that's undertaken by the team. And whilst the team already possess the requisite skills to undertake the enforcement activity, significant training is required to ensure that officers are knowledgeable and equipped to confidently deal with the new duties of the Act, and that's all underway at present. The level of additional demand that will be placed on the council services as a result of the new Act is difficult to quantify, but it's anticipated that it will be significant, particularly in relation to the functions of the housing regulations team in private sector housing. As the new Act places new enforcement duties on the council, there is a requirement to update the enforcement policy for private sector housing. The report outlines the intention to adopt the Association of Chief Environmental Health Officers model enforcement policy, which is anticipated to be widely adopted by councils across the country. The intention is that that will be adopted from the 1st of May, with transitional arrangements in place to ensure that the legal and procedural continuity from the current policy to the new one. So for a limited period of 6 months, both the existing and the new policy will operate in tandem, with the applicable policy being determined by the date of the offence that has occurred. The model policy is contained in Appendix 1, and the corresponding civil penalty matrix is in Appendix 2. The intention is that officers will engage with key stakeholders to seek their views on the new policies, which will be adopted from the 1st of May in order to make sure that we're in line with the responsibilities under the new Act. And then officers will present a further report to Cabinet Member for Community Safety after this time, providing an overview of the newly adopted enforcement policy, a summary of any feedback received from that engagement with stakeholders, and an update on the implementation of the new duties of the Act. That's it from me. Thank you.
So this is a lot of legislation coming down the track quite fast, and there's going to be significant increase in need for us to enforce. I'm right, aren't I, that it is becoming more black and white rather than grey? So if you don't do something, you attract a fixed penalty straight away, and people need to know that. If they breach these guidelines or the law, they're going to get whacked with a fine.
So it's civil penalty notices that are one of the sanctions that would be applied where there are breaches or offences under the new legislation. But you're right, the legislation is more black and white. It's an enforcement-first approach that really does treat offences as something that we should take formal action in the first instance for, and it is quite a departure from the current approach to enforcement under the current policy.
Yes, I mean previously we were looking at things like educate and then enforcement, but now if you don't do what you're supposed to do, then there's no grey area. We've got to come along and slap a big fixed penalty on you. And here they're going up to £40,000. So forewarned is forearmed. So nobody should have any doubt that will happen if people behave badly around HMOs in particular. All right, members, any questions? There's going to be a lot, I hope.
After listening to the report, I think I just need to declare a personal interest, because obviously I'm a multi-property landlord, not just in Portsmouth but across Hampshire.
Yeah, that's noted. That's fine.
That's perfect. Yeah, but I actually, I'd say, as a property landlord, I actually surprisingly support this. I think, you know, for years before being a landlord, I was a renter, and it did feel that the rights were unacceptable. I was involved in a bidding war where we had to bid, and the price went up and up and up, which is a terrible practice. I also had a situation where I I was agreed a rental of a property, then they pulled it out last minute because they found someone else that was willing to pay more, etc. The whole rental system for decades has been shocking, and I think tighter measures are good to support local tenants. I think the pet thing is a really, as a doggy owner myself, I think the pet thing is great because people often do worry about their pets when they're evicted from their properties and have to try and find. And the property market, rental property market, is so scarce at the moment, and it's so competitive that you know. Well, you've probably got it yourself as well, Councillor Hunt. You have residents come to you in absolute panic that they've got pets and feel like they might have to give up their pets and stuff. So I think any controls where it's balanced and fair for the renters is good. So I think most of the stuff that's coming in during this review is a positive thing. But also, you've always got to think about the landlords, and everyone thinks, oh, dodgy landlords, you know, and the get rich quick. It's not as profitable as it once used to be. But you know, we've also got to make sure that we're not discouraging landlords from being in the market as well. You know, and there's a lot of incentives that have been ripped away from landlords, which some will argue is a good thing, some will argue is a bad thing. But on balance, at this precise moment in time, we do need landlords in the private sector to keep the industry flowing. And I do worry that a lot of landlords are going to kind of get rid of their property portfolios, which we're seeing as well. And I say we can debate whether that's a good or bad thing, but they are doing that. They are disposing of assets. But I think these new conditions will, and I think you highlighted this, will help the HMO sector to give people that are renting properties a lot more protections in HMOs, which I think is where we're seeing the biggest rise of problems. So yeah, no questions, but just as a comment, I think it's positive.
I mean, this definitely does shift the balance, not balance, but makes it more fair, as you say, for people. They don't have to be frightened when they're renting a property about what will happen. They know now. What was the other thing? There was something else, but it's really, you know, and of course this is now, this government has at long last, not long last, it's only been in a short while really, but this government has been listening to councils, been listening through the Local Government Association, and it's responded in a positive way. So you have to give credit where it really is well due, that they have listened and the Labour government has responded in this way, which is good. All right, if there's no other comments or whatever, we shall press on to the next one. Thank you, Claire, for your work, and looking forward to the report in due course, which is going to tell us how much more busy that you and your team are. And again, pass on our thanks from this panel to your team for all the good work that they do all the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Now, the ASB case review report. Ms. Rackham.
Hello, so I'm here to provide a brief overview of the updated antisocial behaviour case review process and to seek approval for its implementation. The process is formally known as the Community Trigger and is established under Section 104 and 105 of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act and has been updated in line with the 2025 statutory guidance. It gives residents experiencing persistent antisocial behaviour a formal route to request a multi-agency review where they feel the issues haven't been addressed adequately. The updated process has been shared with Portsmouth Community Safety Partnership Subgroup and was brought to the Health and Wellbeing Board on the 4th of March. It's important to note that this process encompasses all of Portsmouth and is not just a process for Portsmouth homes, but all residents and visitors to the city. In Portsmouth, anyone can request a case review if they have had 3 or more reports about the same issue within 6 months. Requests can be made online, by email or by phone, and once received, the Antisocial Behaviour Unit assesses whether the threshold has been met and informs the applicant within 10 working days. Where the criteria is met, a multi-agency panel is convened. These panels examine what has happened so far, identifies risks or vulnerabilities, reviews the actions taken by each agency, and agrees a coordinated action plan focusing on problem solving rather than blame. The complainant is invited to share information and can attend the meeting if they wish. They also have the right to appeal if they are not satisfied with the outcome. The new process strengthens several areas. It offers clear, accessible pathways for residents to request a case review. It commits us to timely decision making, an eligibility decision within 10 working days and a multi-agency panel within a further 10 working days where thresholds are met. It reinforces the focus on problem solving and not fault finding, making sure agencies review actions taken, identify any gaps and agreed a coordinated action plan for the complainant. It provides a formal appeal route to the Assistant Director of Neighbourhood, and critically, it improves safeguarding, information sharing and partnership working, ensuring that we respond effectively to risk and vulnerability. This updated process ensures we remain legally compliant, provides greater transparency for victims, supports health and well-being by helping residents remain safe in their homes and communities. Monitoring the outcomes of reviews will also help us to identify emerging patterns in service gaps, strengthen our wider community safety work across the city. Given that this process has been agreed by the partnership and is fully aligned with the statutory requirements and best practice, we ask that a decision is made to recommend approval of the case review process with immediate effect.
Well, thank you for that. And again, this is a win situation for members of the public, particularly where they feel that they have been disregarded perhaps by the council or other authorities. There's a chance for them to have a review, and that is a good thing. Reviewing something is always a good thing. So it's a win-win situation about when somebody feels upset that they may not have been listened to properly. Members, any questions or comments on this report?
No. Thank you. And looking through the report, I know we had some figures that were coming in. Do we feel that there is still a certain amount of that's not being reported that could potentially increase numbers or etc.?
So we've had more case review requests in the last 2 months than I think we've had in the last 2 years. So I don't know whether it's just that it's more well spoken about. I don't know whether it's because we've taken the papers to the Health and Wellbeing Board, to the Community Safety Subgroup, that it's more aware of. But we've definitely had more. And we'll be publishing how many requests we've received, how many have met the threshold, and how many case reviews have been completed on the website every year, as per the statutory guidance. But we're definitely seeing more. And it's not just about a council service, it could be a complaint to any service.
Yeah, so it's a significant step forward, you know, so that if people feel like they've been disregarded, now they have a review system, which is really a good thing. Okay, right then, that concludes that, and it's all agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So now we move swiftly to item number 6, which is the antisocial behaviour in Waverley Gardens and Wimbledon Park. Again, Ms Rackham has been presenting this with the head of the service. So the purpose of this report, to make very clear, is not the establishment of PSPO today, but it's to seek approval to take forward the process for a public space protection order, PSPO, in relation to antisocial behaviour in Waverley and Wimbledon, Waverley Gardens and Wimbledon Park. There's a very high legal threshold that has to be accomplished in order to do a PSPO, and including consultation with residents and others. So that will be what we may well decide to do at the conclusion of the debate. So over to you again, Ms Rackham.
I've been called many things. So, Wimbledon Park and Waverley Gardens are neighbourhood parks surrounded by family homes, schools and walking routes. Over the past 3 years, both parks have experienced a sustained and escalating pattern of antisocial behaviour. Analysis of the police data, council complaints and community warden records more than 200 incidents between 2023 and 2025. These incidents have been described by residents as causing fear, distress, disruption and a significant reduction in the community's ability to safely enjoy the important public spaces. Appendix 1 of the report is a detailed analysis of the evidence of the antisocial behaviour. 3 types of these behaviours are consistently at the heart of the problem. The first is alcohol-related disorder, with 64 incidents recorded across both parks. Reports include large groups of up to 30 people drinking, individuals found unconscious, shouting and swearing, violent altercations, smashed glass and gatherings starting early in the morning and continuing late into the night. Residents consistently report sleep disruption, intimidation and concerns for their children's safety. The second behaviour is public urination and defecation, with 11 highly distressing reports, mainly in Waverley Gardens, where individuals have urinated openly, used trees as toilets, or have been found defecated on themselves. These incidents create both a hygiene hazard and an emotional impact on residents. The third behaviour is the playing of loud or amplified music, with 21 reports of music being played at an excessive volume, sometimes until 4 a.m, often accompanied by heavy drinking, shouting and disorder. Again, residents report profound sleep disruption and an inability to use their homes comfortably. Alongside these core issues, the evidence also shows 31 reports of drug use or drug dealing, 55 reports of threatening or intimidating behaviour, 20 reports of fights or assaults, repeated incidents where staff could not safely lock the parks at night, and extensive environmental damage including litter, broken glass, drug paraphernalia and fires. These behaviours rarely occur in isolation. Instead, they cluster together, with alcohol and loud music consistently driving broader disorder. The emotional impact on residents is clear, with many reporting fear, distress, harassment, disrupted sleep and feeling unable to use the parks at all. Another important feature of this evidence is the seasonal pattern. Incidents spike consistently between March and September, with the highest concentration in April, May, June and July. The pattern has repeated for 3 consecutive years. For that reason, the proposed PSPO is designed to operate seasonally, running from the 1st of March to the 30th of September each year. This ensures proportionality and reflects the months where the behaviour demonstrably occurs. As mentioned with the proposed PSPO, I have mentioned other offences. There is other legislation to manage those behaviours. For example, littering is managed under the Environmental Protection Act and drug dealing is managed under the Misuse of Drugs Act. Therefore, they're not proposed within this PSPO. A significant amount of partnership activity has been deployed around the last 3 years, including dispersal orders by the police, frequent police and community warden patrols, additional deployable CCTV, HMO engagement, bus sleeping outreach support, environmental improvements, park gate installation, overnight locking and community engagement with residents. Despite these measures, the problems have not only persisted but have escalated, particularly in 2025. This demonstrates that the current tools are not sufficient on their own and further measures are necessary. A PSPO is therefore proposed because it offers a proportionate, evidence-led framework focused narrowly on 3 behaviours most strongly associated with harm: alcohol consumption and possession of open alcohol, public urination and defecation, and the playing of amplified or excessively loud music. To lawfully make a PSPO, the Council must be satisfied on reasonable grounds that activities are being carried out in a public place that have or are likely to have a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality, and the effect of those activities is likely to be persistent or continuing, unreasonable, and as such that the restrictions are imposed and justified. The legal test is very specific in that the behaviours must not only be happening but also be persistent, unreasonable, and as such justifies the restrictions. These restrictions propose target behaviour and not individuals. They sit alongside rather than replace the support-led approach already used with vulnerable people. Officers will continue to prioritise engagement, advice and referrals to appropriate services, ensuring that enforcement is only used when behaviours are persistent, unreasonable and causing genuine harm. In addition, for 2026, early engagement has happened with patrols from police and community wardens, and a number of further activities are planned, including 2 weekly meetings with the police to discuss incidents and horizon planning, collating a list of persons engaged with and persons of interest. Engagement event we've got planned for early April to speak to residents about reporting, as well as engaging with local businesses and visitors, delivering a co-produced leaflet with the police on how to report antisocial behaviour and the importance of reporting it. A packed meeting for this summer, so a police and community together meeting, as well as beat surgeries. So today I'm asking you to approve starting the statutory consultation from the week commencing the 11th of May after the election period on a proposed public space protection order for Wimbledon Park and Waverley Gardens under section 59 of the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act, to give approval for the Head of Community Safety and relevant officers to carry out the prescribed legal process for PSPO, including preparing all statutory notices required under the Act, and lastly agree that once consultation is complete, officers to return with a final report summarising consultation responses and recommending whether the PSPO should be made or abandoned. Any questions?
All right, so now if Denise Perry will come forward and Councillor Heaney, thank you. So, Ms. Perry, you have in front of you a machine. Right, so you press the yellow button to talk. If you like, just press it and see what you'll see. The machine lights up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, closer. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay, that's fine then.
Just one moment. We'll come to you in a second. Councillor Heaney, are you all set up there? All right. Okay. Very good. So, would you like to give your deputation, Denise?
Thank you. Yes, hi, I'm Denise Perry. I'm a Southsea resident and a community campaigner, and I've spoken to residents near Waverley Gardens and Wimbledon Park. They've repeatedly expressed concerns about antisocial behaviour and a lack of solutions in the area. Many feel intimidated, especially walking past groups of intoxicated people who often linger in the alleyway between Wimbledon Park and Waverley Road. These disruptive activities significantly impact the peace and well-being of the community. With the support of Councillor Hugh Mason, we distributed a street letter survey to 200 homes in the area. The letter informed the residents about today's meeting and asked for their views, which I am sharing today. Residents, as evidenced by doorstop discussions and return surveys, are supportive of a formal consultation. Their only concern is that if a public space protection order is approved, enforcement must be consistent and effective. I'd like to inform the committee that local residents, in support of Agenda Item 6, Recommendation 2.1, favour the start of a statutory consultation process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney. You're doing, I guess you're doing...
I will start with Councillor Sharada's
That's it.
deputation, which I've been asked to read on her behalf, and I will make sure that I don't take more than my allotted 6 minutes for that.
Would you be able to hand in a copy, do you reckon, to the minute taker later?
Do you have a copy? Yes.
Yeah. Is that all right? Thank you.
So, excuse me. So, Charlotte says, thank you to the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Leisure and Sport for accepting my written deputation presented by my councillor colleague, Councillor Graham Heaney. I apologise for not being at the meeting in person. I have a clashing work meeting. That means I can't join today. My deputation is in support of Item 6, Antisocial Behaviour in Waverley Gardens and Wimbledon Park, which seeks approval to take forward the process for a public space protection order in relation to antisocial behaviour in Waverley Gardens and Wimbledon Park. I'm in support of this action as a councillor and a local resident who lives nearby and spends considerable time walking around the area almost on a daily basis. Although I'm not a St Jude ward councillor, as Central Southsea is nearby and many residents live in the vicinity of the parks know I use the green spaces myself, walking my dog or using the park with my daughter, I've also received a considerable amount of casework over 3 years in relation to the ongoing ASB at these parks. I've also been witness to much of the ASB this report so accurately describes, and I have first-hand experience of ASB myself. Like the hundreds of residents living in the vicinity of both parks, when walking my dog through the area, I've seen large groups congregating, drinking, talking and dealing drugs, exposing themselves, defecating in the park, and the violence that frequently breaks out. Usually when I walk my dog through Waverley Gardens, I often don't experience harassment myself, but last summer I did have a very abusive confrontation with one of the congregating groups. I was walking my dog at lunchtime and one of the members of the group had a staffy, which when I approached with my dog, tried to go for my dog and bite him. Luckily, my dog is a French bulldog, only weighs 20 kilograms and wears a harness, so I was able to lift him above my head and get him to safety. When I was a safe distance, I felt compelled to ask the dog owner to consider putting a muzzle on the dog, as it was lunchtime and many people walked their dogs through the park at that time, and it wasn't acceptable that he was sat with a group in the middle of the park where many dogs could get confrontations with his. I was thinking in particular of the many young people who walk their dogs and have much bigger breeds like Labradors who wouldn't be able to lift their dogs to safety in the same way I can. After I made this suggestion politely, I got a round of abuse hurled at me with expletives I won't repeat for the meeting today. I did inform the group that they were messing with the wrong person because I was a local councillor and had contact with the police and was going to report this incident to them. What amazed me was the group didn't even flinch. They didn't care at all that I had contact with the police, and they actually just laughed at me and continued the verbal abuse. It just so happened when I called my local police contacts, I had saved in my phone, one officer was local and available and could hear I was distressed, so came within minutes to follow up with the individuals. The officers were incredibly helpful and warned the individual to watch their behaviour. However, because there was no PSPO in place, there was little more the police could do. Given what I've seen and experienced myself, I really sympathise with the residents living in the local area about the situation in these parks and the impact ASB is having on their lives. From spring, summer into early autumn every year, the gatherings take place daily and at all times of day and night. Loud music is played, big gatherings and violence breaks out in a common feature throughout the period. For residents in the area, they're unable to sleep, they're worried about their safety for their children and scared to utilise the green space. There's been considerable work over the years with the Council's community safety team, councillors, the police and local residents to attempt to improve the ASB issues there. I'd like to thank the cross-party working and the partnership working that has meant we have secured many improvements to the park to try and tackle the ASB. I won't list them all, but by far the most impactful has been closing the gates of the parks at night, CCTV being installed in the area and the removal of the benches from the centre of the park, which was actually my husband's idea. Well done to Aaron. All of those actions have made the park clearer visually, have created less hiding places to congregate and have prevented gatherings taking place within the park in the middle of the night. However, unfortunately, all of the actions taken so far have not resolved the ASB and crime issues in these two parks. The gatherings still continue, as well as the disturbances for those living in the immediate vicinity of the parks, the many families that use the parks as routes to get to local schools, and pedestrians and dog walkers who use these routes to access vital and limited green space. While I understand that residents living in supported housing there need somewhere to live and to socialise, taking drugs and drinking and getting into fights and brawls does not help their recovery or assimilation into community life. It only causes further issues for them and their housing options. And for many years now, it has felt that there's been an imbalance with the minority residents causing a disproportionate amount of crime at the ASB, as well as the disturbances and public nuisance that has, without exaggeration, made other residents' lives a living hell.
Thank you very much for that helpful speech, whatever it is. Go on. Yeah, you carry on now. Sorry.
I've got a couple of questions, actually, that I want to include in my deputation, so I will ask those at the beginning, and then I'll just say a few words about what has happened over recent years. Whilst I looked at the report and I heard Lauren speak, and so she says the consultation will start in May. I'm just not sure how long the consultation will take, and then at what stage a PSPO might be considered for implementation. So if I could maybe have an answer to that question later, that'd be really helpful.
Let's answer it now, because something might come out of it.
So the consultation will be a minimum of 4 weeks, slightly more 4 to 6 weeks, and then we'll need some time to analyse the responses from it, which will probably take 2 weeks. As a guide, I do reserve the right that it might take longer if we get lots of information back. I will then have to pull together an analysis document very similar to the one that you've got in this report, which will then be shared with legal, then have to pull together the report, and it will be the availability of the next meeting, whether that goes to Cabinet or back to this portfolio briefing for a decision. So I would imagine it's not going to be the end of May. It's going to probably take about 12 weeks. Yeah.
So on that, Councillor Heaney, I understand the frustration, but the officers will tell you how very keen I have been to get this to this meeting, and you have to make it stack up. A lot of legal stuff had to be, forgive me saying, it sounds trite, I's dotted and T's crossed. There was a lot of discussion. So we've got it here today, and I will deal with it. I will put the same pressure on the officers that I've been putting on for some time now to bring it as soon as we possibly can, and that's all I can guarantee at this moment.
The assurance we can say is this is a priority piece of work, and it will be prioritised.
No, thank you for that. That's useful, because I'm sure people will ask me when is it going to happen. I know I'll be able then to say something.
And on saying that, I think the advent of this is going to see even more interest rather than we have had before. You know, we have to get everybody. I'm sorry to do big day, but we have to get everybody on the same page, including the police, including legal, and it has been not quite straightforward. All right, sorry, you carry on.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to see the report here. I attended the meeting in July last year where we had a community meeting with the police, and there was a real commitment then to take the PSPO forward. I'm very grateful for Councillor Hunt for doing that. I recognise it's not a magic bullet, it's not going to solve every problem, but I think it is a useful tool to help deal with the problems we've had. I look back at my emails to see when I started first getting contact about this issue, and it really goes back to 2022. And residents had basically compiled like a portfolio of pictures and items about what had gone on, and they sent it to myself, to Councillor Gerardo. And obviously they had faced a summer of considerable disruption and problems. They had been reporting it, but I think it probably was seen maybe not to be trivialising, but I think probably people thought it was just one-off incidents, just a few incidents a few times. And I think it took a while to recognise that there was a wider long-term problem going on. We worked, myself, Councillor Smythe and Councillor Gerardo worked with Steve Morgan. We did some letters to around residents saying, giving them information on how to report stuff. We also talked to them about the problem. And one of the issues that came up was the locking of the park, and we pushed very strongly for that, and that had made a real difference. And I actually found an email where I sent an email to Lauren saying thank you very much for all the work. People are really pleased about that. It made a real difference to the behaviour people were suffering. So that was really good. The other thing that was happening, I think people were beginning to get fed up with reporting it, and I said, please keep reporting it. Please keep telling us what it is, because it gives the intelligence. And actually, the appendices report here basically backs that up. Because we have the detailed evidence of what has been going on, we can build evidence base for our solution. So I say to people, if you are suffering against such behaviour, it may be frustrating, we may not be able to solve it, but please, please, please do keep reporting it, because it builds an intelligence base for possible actions in the future. So I think that's been really helpful, and we still encourage people, of course, to do that. As I said, it's been a long-standing issue. It's been frustrating, and I suppose for people who live there, sometimes it's assumed people are away at work, and some people are during the day, but of course we now know many more people work at home, and of course if you're working at home and you've got all this noise and disturbance and problems going on outside, it's much more difficult to work. So it has much more of a disruptive effect maybe than sometimes we realise. The residents on Shirley Road in particular do suffer because they face right opposite the park. I'm glad to see that it also includes Wimbledon Park, because clearly Wimbledon Park is more popular, used by families, but of course it is potentially available for people to behave badly in it, and the fact it's covering that as well is really good. I mean, the final thing I'd like to say is that there is sometimes an implied suggestion that when we are complaining about the behaviours, and because we are seeking action, we are somehow unsympathetic to those people who suffer from drug and alcohol addiction. That is not the case. All of the residents that I have spoken to in the years that we've been doing this, last 2.5, 3 years, none of them have been unsympathetic to the problems that people suffering addiction have. They all recognise that these people have problems, but they all hope that they will get solutions to their problems, their background problems, and will be able to lead good and fulfilling lives. But there comes a point at which you have to say, the behaviours some of them engage in do cause enough of a problem. We can't just say, well, it's just because they've got problems and we can't do anything about it. There have to be some boundaries around it. And so therefore I think doing this sort of thing is really quite important. I'd like in the future, if possible, to be at least our local councillors, the ward councillors, be given a copy of the How to Report guide so we know what residents have got. Also, if there's going to be some surveys going on, when you're doing them would be useful to know, because actually we may get people saying, oh, somebody's done a survey, and if we know it's happening, we can then say, yeah, this is part of the process to try and help you. So that would be really helpful too. So that's, and I hope we'll continue the meetings that we have with the police and yourselves and your team, to maybe at least once a year, just to see how things are going, because that'd be really helpful. So I probably have slightly gone over my time, so I do apologise. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, it's an important issue, and I think certainly the photographs you described, and around about the time I first received them and it was brought to my attention, I didn't hesitate to involve all of the ward councillors, Labour and Liberal Democrat, in that vicinity, and on both sides of Waverley Road. So I made sure I involved, indeed, Central Southsea too. So I made sure that everybody was involved. We don't get to do this kind of stuff unless everybody's on the same page. That's really important. So I just wanted to make that point arising out of your deputation. This is cross-party and cross-services within the council and outside of. That's very important to understand. You're right, it's not going to be a silver bullet if indeed it were to be implemented. We have to wait for the consultation, and throughout the course of the consultation I'll be kept informed, and we will bring this back to this place as soon as we possibly can. The officers know very well my concern that this should be expedited, the report rather, back to here as quickly as possible. I'm not sure. The other thing that came out of Councillor Gerarda's deputation was about the dogs running about. So we do have a PSPO already in the city where dogs have to be kept on lead if they're directed to. We did touch on this, Ms. Rackham, during it. Do we have? If we were to come to a decision and say 2.5 months' time or thereabouts, a bit further away than that. Would I be able to put in an additional proposition like keeping dogs on leads if directed to, if it's not in the consultation? Because if it's not, that needs to go in too.
Yeah, if it's not in the consultation, it can't be added into the PSPO, and we can't duplicate. So we can't have something which we already have enforcement for, like littering. If we've already got a PSPO around doggy on the lead and dog fouling, we can't duplicate it.
So the PSPO about the dogs on the lead is up at the beach at Eastney, and it's seasonal. But I, Charlotte,
It's in our parks as well.
It's in our parks as well.
Yeah.
So fine, we're covered.
So it's
then.
already covered.
All
It would
right.
just be about enforcing it.
Yeah, I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
I guess members are going to want to ask some questions. As I say, it's not a silver bullet, Councillor Narin, but it's a step in the right direction.
Yes, thank you so much for that report. But the only thing I want to ask, because if this thing has been ongoing since 2022, and this is 2026, and now that we are approaching summer, is there anything in place to safeguard people around for now until, because I know you are going to do consultation by May. So is there anything in place now, anything in place to safeguard the residents?
Yes, so we already have a plan in place for 2026. So we've already started meeting with the local police, so we will be doing joint patrols. One of the challenges around Wimbledon and Waverley Park is the people causing the antisocial behaviour really, they're not there for transient. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Are really transient, so it's really difficult around any enforcement activity, but we have now started to collate a person of interest list, so we can start monitoring those behaviours, and we can still issue things like community protection warnings for people who are repeatedly causing antisocial behaviour. We like I said, we're doing engagement events to help people understand how to report. It's been touched upon today, but reporting, I appreciate, takes time, but it's so important, otherwise resources don't get directed to the right places. There is a beach surgery by the local police already planned, and we will be advertising our Partnership and Community Together meeting. So there is lots going on, and there is lots of engagement activity, and it is like I said, it's a priority for our community warden, CCTV, and for our local police.
So, Councillor Noran, the police do have powers. They have powers of arrest, for example. You know, they can use those powers if they choose to, but there aren't so many police. This is one of our problems. They do have other powers that they can utilise in order to disperse people and so on. But they're only like 48 hours now, aren't they? Something like that.
Yeah, so section 34 and 35 of the Antisocial Behaviour Police and Crime Act for dispersal powers, but they can only put them on for 48 hours. That is changing and going up to, I believe, 72, isn't it? But it can only disperse someone out the area for a period of time, and there's lots of restrictions around it. So you can't disperse someone away from their home, their medical centre, etc. And again, that's a good short-term measure. It's not a long-term solution.
No, it's not a quick fix. The long-term solution is to fund social services and other services like drug rehabilitation better than now, except this government's taking £300,000 away from us to do that. So, you know, it is quite daft. Nevertheless, that's a sort of different issue. And as I say, you know, if there are issues, Councillor Naran, we will get on to that as quickly as we possibly can. What this does do over a prolonged period, it gives our wardens the ability to issue fixed penalties and so on. So that training is underway, I believe, in order to make sure that our wardens can deal with this in more in a stronger way. Is that right?
Yeah, so the community wardens are CSAS accredited, which is Community Safety Accreditation Scheme by the police. So they've already had training in dealing with conflicts and antisocial behaviour, and they've got delegated powers from the Chief Executive to issue FPNs for breach of PSPOs for the dog one that we've already got. And if this PSPO progresses and goes in place, then those powers will be redelegated to issue FPNs for this PSPO.
So it may seem silly to issue a fixed penalty notice to somebody who's homeless, for example, or who hasn't got much money, for example. But what happens if they don't pay the fine? Correct me if I'm wrong. That then they get taken to court and a CBO can be applied, and if that's not complied with, then they end up in jail. Is that about right?
Yeah, so failure to pay would lead to prosecution by the magistrates' court, and as it progresses, there are other sanctions, but that would be down to the individual magistrate on the day.
And so the magistrate can issue orders to attend alcohol rehabilitation, depending on the age. A 16-year-old would have to go for a year. 18 plus, the order would be for a minimum of 3 years, for example. So it has a lot of strength to it. The process will have a lot of strength to it. All right, then. I'll go over to members now, if that's all right. Councillor.
You nearly said it. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Again, it's not really a question because I think we've been given a lot of information and we all support what you're trying to achieve. There's just a couple of things, if I do remember them. So the first one, I know that I think Councillor Heaney, you mentioned the Councillor Dorrington and the what he was saying in full council last week around support for young people. So I think we can empathise with people if they do have a drug or alcohol addiction, and it's just trying to make sure that they get help as well. But in the same instance, your home is like your sanctuary. So for people living in the area, whether you work at home or whether you live there, that is where you just want to be, and you just don't want to have the disturbances I can imagine that that people are having around there, and I fully sympathise because it really can't be pleasant on occasions, especially drug paraphernalia being left in parks with children, dogs. That's just not how we want the city to be as well. So I think we've as councillors and just general humans, we've got a complete empathy with people if they are in a situation they're really struggling with, but you also have to appreciate how people want to live in a safe, clean, tidy environment. And I think what you're proposing is great. I really hope that it can go forward as quickly as possible, and that the measures are going to provide that safety and reassurance for people over the warmer months, and it's really to echo the report, because certainly when we've had a lot of break-ins in the north of the city, when we look at police reports, people are saying on Facebook pages, my house has been broken into or my car's been broken into, but they haven't necessarily reported the incident. So I think it's just really important to ensure that everything is logged, because then it helps with your data, doesn't it? Was there anything else? Sorry. I think
Don't worry, you can come back to it.
Yeah, I might. Yeah, if I remember, I'll come back. But that was kind of it in a nutshell.
I'll help jog your memory then. So yes, when this was brought to my attention some time ago, I mean, it really did concern me. I mean, the thought of somebody dropping their trolleys in the park adjacent to a tree in full view of the bay and forecourts of young children looking out onto the park, literally yards away, for me it was just awful. So I got involved, and we are where we are now. It's not gone as fast as I would have liked, but everything else was tried before. And you have to do everything else before you do this, because otherwise it undermines your attempt to do this. So as I say, the legal process is really important, and we're in a good place in the legal process now. I think Councillor Madrick, you're itching to go, or not? Very good. Councillor Narin, anything? All right then, so without further ado, let's get on with this consultation, shall we? Thank you all very much for your time. I know the amount of work that you put into this, going on late in the evening, with me ringing you up saying, where is it, where is it, where is it? So thank you very much for putting up with me as well. And thank you to Councillor Heaney and to Councillor Garada for bringing their points of view, and to Mrs Perry for bringing her deputation here today, and for keeping everybody to the end. Much obliged. That's the meeting closed.